in this third session of week 8 lecture, I will talk about yakiniku, the grilled beef in general. That includes also pork and also chicken and all kinds of meat, because that is another symbol for Korean food in Japan. And as a matter of fact, it was Koreans. Koreans dominate these yakiniku restaurants throughout Japan. Nearly half of yakiniku restaurants seems like they are owned and operated by Koreans. And then why Koreans are known to be yakiniku restaurant owners? I will cover that. But anyway, as the number of Koreans in Japan increased, especially in the 1920s, and now that is a time when Japan went through heavy industrialization, and especially in Osaka region, which sucked so many Korean migrant workers. So, especially in Osaka region, the number of Koreans increased, and it was at that time that Koreans introduced barbecue culture of Korea to Japan at that time. As we already had covered that during Joseon Dynasty, Koreans maintained the habit of eating grilled meat. So naturally, these Koreans came to Japan with that culture. And however, in Japan, most people were not used to eat meat too much yet. And I will explain the reason why. But anyway, Koreans in large cities such as Tokyo and Osaka and Kobe, Kyoto, and so on, that they initiated this barbecue business, especially after the Pacific War. After the war, now Koreans lost Japanese citizenship, and they were merely the resident aliens. And immediately after the war, there was not much job in Japan, even for Japanese, not to mention Koreans. So naturally, a lot of Koreans, they try to lead life by barbecuing meat in Japan, which Japanese were not used. And why? Because traditionally, in Japan, even today, Buddhism is a very strong religion. So when Buddhism was accepted in Japan by 6th, 7th century, the Buddhism brought this ideology that meat eating or killing animals' life is not good, and particularly dealing with meat or animal skin was considered unclean. It's a dirty work. And now that became the job of so-called burakumin. And people, ordinary people, would not try to contact burakumin people, and they would not marry them. And that tradition still exists even today. People would not know who are the descendants of burakumin, but they know. Especially in rural community, they know who are burakumin, and they have a hard time, even today. However, of course, that's much better than before. But anyway, in Japan, they had a very strong tradition that killing animal, dealing with animal skin, or eating meat is not considered clean. So it has been strongly discouraged in Japan. Of course, that changed after Meiji Restoration, when Japanese elite eagerly tried to accept Western civilization, and they also wanted Japanese people to become healthier and stronger in international competition. So Japanese military, as a matter of fact, promoted eating meat, and Japanese, probably the military people were the first people who were supplied with beef in Japan. And from Korean Peninsula during the colonial period, a lot of cows were raised and brought to Japan, and it was for military supply. So anyway, meat consumption in Japan grew rapidly after Meiji Restoration, but still for many people, even until until the Pacific War, people were normally hesitant eating meat, and they would not consider dealing with meat, blood, and animal, and it was not clean thing. And that, because of that, gave some opportunity for these poor Koreans. And in Japan, this yakiniku, the grilled meat dishes, were simply called Chosen ryori, which means Korean food. So when Japanese said Chosen ryori, Korean food, in 1960s, until 1960s, it meant grilled beef. So in the mind of Japanese perception, the Koreans are the meat-eating people, in a sense. But of course, Koreans could not eat meat that much because meat was expensive and Koreans were poor. And that's why in our next session, we will talk about this particularly interesting dish, which is called horomonyaki. But here, anyway, yakiniku offered a significant economic opportunity for poor Korean residents in Japan. And today, as I said, about 40% of all yakiniku shops throughout Japan is owned by Zainichi Koreans. That's the big Koreatown in Tsuruhashi, Osaka. And as you see, a lot of these chochins, the red paper lantern, and says yakiniku, and there are a lot of yakiniku places, all run and owned by Koreans. And that's the entry of small Koreatown, and it says, welcome. And I think this one is particularly interesting because it says what? Oiso, Poiso, Saiso. Okay, so now that's a Gyeongsangdo dialect. So that which means please come and look and buy. Okay, so that's very interesting. The motto that stands at the entry of Koreatown. And because Koreans are heavily engaged in this yakiniku business, there is an even association. Now, the All Japan Yakiniku Association, which is like a Jengoku Yakiniku Kyokai, is formed, and many of them are Koreans. Okay, and they even have their logo song, Gogo Garubi, Garubi-kun. So now that man in the small cartoon, he's a Mr. Galbi. Okay. So he would sing this song. And another big change that Japanese mainstream members of Japanese society could enjoy barbecue more happened sometime in 1970s. Because traditionally, Japanese people are very sensitive about smell. And they would not like to go Korean barbecue shops because there's a lot of smoke, and in your clothes, the smell of the meat and the smoke would be and it wouldn't smell good after you eat. Now that was resolved very much by this new invention by a Japanese company, Shimpo. And what they did was they made smokeless barbecue system. In this image, you see that the table, the grilling table. And so inside it has a motor and suction duct and everything. So when you grill your meat, actually it doesn't smell much because all the smokes are sucked from the beneath of the table and it goes into and disappear to somewhere outside. And now this system gave ordinary Japanese to come and enjoy yakiniku more than before, because now you don't need to worry about smell. And as a matter of fact, when you go good yakiniku restaurant in Japan, they have all kinds of measures to prevent the grilling smoke going into your clothing. And now one is they will give you one-time disposable gown, so which protects your suit. And second, they use this smokeless grill, but also they have a very good ventilation system and clean everything so thoroughly. So as a matter of fact, you really don't smell any meat in the shop. So this was a great invention that helped popularization of yakiniku. And in our next session, we will talk about interesting yakiniku culture of hormone yaki.